John, I always feel as if there's nothing else for me to say now, that long introduction, but I wanted to thank John Mulvey for these kind remarks and to thank the Edinburgh North and Leith Yes Scotland campaign for inviting me to speak, and above all I wanted to thank you for coming, because I'm sure from our point of view at the top table and the organisers, without you as an audience this wouldn't be a meeting. So it's very important that you're here, and it's a very important debate that Scotland is currently engaged in, and so it's all credit for you, all credit to you for engaging in that debate. And I would ask you to make no mistake about this debate. This isn't just a debate about how you'll vote on September the 18th, Thursday, September the 18th. It's not just a vote for independence for Scotland. It's a vote against the neoliberal agenda, economic model, and the warmongering agenda that has been foisted on Scotland by Westminster, Whitehall and the City of London for decades. That's the context of this debate, and I think it's clearly that important. And as Robin and Michelle have made clear, the Yes Scotland campaign, all of us, we intend to establish a social democratic alternative to all that, because that's what the majority of people in Scotland want to see. And Scotland, as my colleagues have said, is one of the richest countries in the world. We want to see that great wealth that Scotland generates distributed far more fairly, far more evenly than has ever been the case before. And frankly, that means that communities like this one in North Edinburgh and the one I live in South Edinburgh get a far fairer share and a far greater percentage of that wealth than we've ever seen before. That's what this debate's about. That's what the independence debate is about. And I want to make one thing clear to you at the very beginning before I go any further. Supporting the democratic right of nations like Scotland to self-determination doesn't make you a Scottish nationalist. It makes you a democrat. Because it's a democratic right that the people of Scotland are entitled to have. We just want to be an independent, free country, in the same way the 260 other independent, free countries in the world line up. That's all. No favours, no lottery winners, no prizes for guessing that I was connected to Copenhagen. None like that. We just want what everybody else takes for granted. And I'm a trade unionist and a socialist, proud of it, who supports independence. And the distinction that I would want to make clear, I stand here in the traditions of John Maclean, 100 years ago, the leader of the Red Clydesiders in the west of Scotland, and the same tradition as James Connolly, perhaps the greatest, most famous socialist ever produced by this city. And John Maclean and James Connolly would never ever have described themselves as nationalists, but both of them were passionate advocates of an independent Scotland. And that's the noble, honourable tradition that I stand in. And I often watch the debate. You know, the Winter Olympics is on just now. Just as we had with the Summer Olympics last year or the year before, whatever year it was. And you're reminded of all the mistakes these commentators make. They ought to be reminded that Scotland is a nation. We're a country. We're not a region or a province of anywhere else. We're not a region or a province of Britain. And we're damn sure not a region or a province of England. We're a country, we're a nation, and we're entitled as a nation to be free and independent if that's what we want. And so this debate here is a very important one, and it's my job tonight, I suppose, to put in front of you the democratic and indeed the social democratic case for independence. And put simply, that means that communities like yours in North Edinburgh and in South Edinburgh, working class communities across the length and breadth of Britain, we'll be better off. That's why we support independence. The working class majority in this country will be better off economically, will be better off socially, and will be better off politically. And that's what I want to focus my remarks upon. Now, as Michelle, Robin have made clear, Britain's the 8th richest country in the world, according to the OECD, the Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development. So they're the people who should know. They're the ones who draw up the league table. And they have Scotland, with the ownership of our oil and gas reserves, as the 8th richest country in the world. And like all the other rich countries in the world, we're a wealthy country because our economy is diverse. Yes, we have oil and gas, but we don't just have oil and gas. We have renewable energy that now provides a third of our electricity. We have profitable financial services sector, a lot of it based in this city. We've got a manufacturing base, a construction industry, a food and drinks industry, a whisky industry that's never been more lucrative. We've got creative industries. We've got a public sector that produces highly skilled, educated and talented workforce. And by the way, the people, that highly talented and educated workforce are our most precious resource and our greatest gift. And I only mention this list, not to bore the pants off you, but to rebut the charge that's put by the other side that somehow Scotland is some economic basket case, that we couldn't look after ourselves, that we'd end up eating porridge and drinking whisky and that'd be our life. That's what they argued in 1979. That's what they argued then. Scotland is too wee, too stupid, and we eat porridge and drink whisky. And the fact is, it now stands to reason that if all the taxes you paid, all your income tax, all your national insurance contributions, all your VAT, all the duty you pay in petrol, all the taxes you pay in booze and tobacco, all the corporation tax and capital gains tax, all those taxes that we pay in Scotland stayed here, instead of being siphoned off by the UK Treasury in London, then it stands to reason we'd be better off. We'd have a damn sight more money at our disposal than we have currently. Scotland raises £50 billion a year in these taxes and duties. And the budget for Fiona in the Scottish Parliament, 34 billion. So we're £17 billion short somewhere that they owe us. And for me, when you look at these figures, the thing that cries out is, what could we be doing with that extra revenue? What could we be doing with the extra £17 billion that they take out of us? Leaving aside the North Sea oil and the other industries that would come to us, that we would own. And I look around North Edinburgh. I go across the length and breadth of Scotland at these meetings, I'm sure my colleagues do too. And I'm horrified, quite frankly, that Scotland, the 8th richest country in the world in the 21st century, that there's 1 in 3 children in North Edinburgh and in Glasgow and elsewhere in this country in dire need, in poverty. That's an outrage. It's an outrage that there's 1 in 3 households in Scotland today, the 13th of February 2014, living in fuel poverty. It's an outrage that there are pensioners who don't get to live in retirement and dignity. It's an outrage that in the 21st century, we've now seen the equivalent of the soup kitchens for the 1930s by people getting packets of beans, packets of rice, packets of noodles, handed out to them in food parcels in Scotland in the 21st century. People say to me, what's this debate about? That's what this debate's about. That's what it's about. We have the power to bring that to an end. And by Christ, I intend to seize it. And you have to too. We've got the opportunity to eradicate the scourge of low pay in this city. Edinburgh, the 2nd richest city in Britain. Tens of thousands of people barely surviving in work, in poverty. We've got underemployment in this city. We've got parts of this city as poor as anywhere you'll find in Scotland, poor as anywhere you'll find in Britain. And it's the second richest city in Britain. And those kind of inequalities, I think, we rightly see as an affront, and we want to bring them to an end. So we'll be socially better off because we, at long last, get the chance to address these inequalities. We get a chance to address the chronic shortage of affordable housing in this city, amongst the many other things that we face. That's what independence gives us the chance to address, and I'm damn sure I'm going to make every effort I can to address it. And the political advantage we had, I mentioned, we'll be economically better off, we'll be socially better off with independence, and we'll be politically better off under independence, because when we decide in September the 18th to an independent Scotland, there'll be no more David Camerons. There'll be no more Tory governments. There'll be no more private nuclear weapons based in the Clyde. There'll be no more bedroom tax and coal tax. There'll be no more anti-union laws that force working people into undignified employment. That's what we intend to change, and independence gives us that opportunity, because working class people in Scotland are held back by the union. And as my colleagues have said, Robin pointed it quite rightly too, of course it isn't vote for yes and keep the status quo? I'm afraid not. I bring you the bad news. As Ed Miliband himself announced just on Tuesday, even the election of a Labour government, there'll be austerity implemented when that Labour government comes to power. More cuts in public services, more attacks on welfare rights, more attacks on immigrants and claimants holding them scapegoated for crimes created by the bankers. So it isn't just the status quo, it's worse and worse and worse. They've taken the trouble to warn you what is coming down the line. You should at least heed their warnings. And I want to say this to finish, and John. The Labour Party, Margaret Curran, one of the spokespersons for Better Together, is fond of saying that Scotland, it gets the best of both worlds because we have a strong parliament, as she says, and vital influence in the UK. Well, I have to say to you, after 10 years at Holyrood, you'd have thought Margaret Curran would have learned something. Because the truth of the matter is, Holyrood doesn't have strong powers. It has very limited powers. That's the whole point of this debate. The powers that Holyrood have are insufficient for what we want to see addressed. I was an MP representing your good selves and the Lothians for 4 years at Holyrood. And we were there, as Fiona, as I'm sure, is told today, we're constantly told about what we can't talk about. Colin, you can't talk about unemployment. Colin, you can't talk about industrial relations. Colin, you can't talk about low pay in the Scottish Parliament. You can't talk about the economy. You can't talk about soldiers, laddies and lassies for this city dying in Iraq and Afghanistan. You can't talk about the obscenity of Trident, because they're no for you. They're for another place. That's for the grown-ups to talk about. You don't get to talk about that. The things that my constituents came to see me every Friday. I couldn't talk about that in the Parliament. So we don't have a Parliament with the powers that we need. And neither do we have influence in the UK Parliament, because if we did, the vast majority in Scotland didn't want the bedroom tax. We got lumberware. We didn't want the Royal Mail to be privatised. We got lumberware. We didn't want the second generation of Trident nuclear weapons. Didn't even want the first ones. But we get lumbered with them. That's the truth. We don't have any influence at Westminster. And truth is, independence gives us those powers at long last. No more Tory governments, none of those policies, no more destruction of our manufacturing base. And I have to say to you, I'm the national spokesperson of the Scottish Socialist Party. For me, independence gives working class people the chance to change our lives profoundly. I'm a socialist, I'm for an independent socialist Scotland. I'm in favour of a modern, democratic republic for Scotland. I believe the people of this country should be sovereign. We should have an elected, accountable, representative head of state. I believe in all those things and more. My time's up, I would tell you about them if I had more time. But the truth is, none of that is possible without a yes vote on September the 18th. And I have to say, I'm confident that we're going to win on September the 18th. I'm confident about it. Because independence, the yes choice, is the progressive choice in this referendum. And people in Scotland have got a habit, a tradition of taking that progressive choice. And my prediction is by the 13th of February next year, you won't be able to find anybody who voted no. I'm old enough to remember 1979, which is 35 years ago, and a woman called Mrs. Thatcher got elected in 1979. By 1980, you couldn't find anybody who'd voted for her. She was that hated. Nobody would own up to it. And my view is, in a year from now, you won't find anybody who's prepared to admit that they voted no, because yes is the obvious option. We'll be standing in a year's time and going, of course it was the right thing to do. Of course we were right to choose our own future. We're going to win. And you want to make sure that when we do win, you can turn to John Mulvey and me and Michelle and Robin and Fiona and say, I did that. I did that. We did that collectively. We changed Scotland forever. We changed the world. Thank you very much for your time.